Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to the Power of Educating Our Own. Uh, this is a show that is hosted by the Clara Muhammad Schools Network. I am one of your hosts, Sister Marsha Nivens Muhammad, and I'm here with my co-host,
Patricia Salahuddin. Welcome. Assalamu alaikum.
Yes, and so we're back for another show to help to enrich our lives, help to enrich education for our children, help to enrich our institutions, and to build up a model of what it is that we provide in our community for comprehensive benefit for all. And so tonight we are going to be discussing all things interior design with a specific focus on interior wellness, which I'm not even sure if you've all heard that terminology before, but today you are going to hear about all things interior wellness. And before we get into that conversation, if you are joining us on our social media, either Facebook or YouTube, let us know where you're joining us from. Give us the lambs in the chat or just greet us the best way that you can in the chat and let us know where you are watching us from. We are going to, let's see, I got some, okay, I don't have anything coming up in the chat yet, but I do want to make sure that you all know that the chat is there. If you have questions, feel free to put those questions in the chat. We love to hear from you and we love to incorporate you into our conversation. And with that, we're going to jump right in. So tonight's guest is Sister Aida Akil, and she's actually another member of the Clara Muhammad Schools Network board. And so she's doing double duty today, right? So she's a board member, but she's also to talk to us about her passion and her thing, and that is interior design. So assalamu alaikum, Sister Aida, and welcome.
Well, alaikum assalam. Thank you so much. I'm super happy to be here, be a part of the board, and to discuss what I'm really passionate about, alhamdulillah.
Absolutely. And so I'm going to say, let's jump right into it. Let those who are watching know who you are, what you do, and how you even got into the work that you do.
Okay, well, my name is Aida. I currently reside in Atlanta, Georgia. I am a proud member of the Atlanta Masjid, which is associated with the Clara Muhammad Schools here in Atlanta. My kids go to the school. I am an interior wellness specialist. Most people have heard of interior design, but may not understand what interior wellness is. But I specialize in interior wellness, and I am moving into the commercial space, schools, masjids, things like that, with those type of designs, and kind of reimagining them where I feel like historically we haven't really given that much thought into the design for these spaces.
So when you say wellness, could you elaborate on that word a little bit as it relates to interior design?
Absolutely. So interior wellness is the thought and belief that your space, the interior and exterior to a degree, affects your mental and physical health. So if someone says that, oh man, I just feel like my space is making me feel sick, that's real. That is true. If you're in a place that doesn't reflect you, that can affect you mentally. If you're in a place that just doesn't have some of the basics like good lighting, a color palette and color theory that goes with what you want that space to be. So for example, if you are in a space that's supposed to be creative, and perhaps if it's really dark, you might not feel that creative spark. However, if you kind of have lighter, brighter colors, you might feel that spark, especially like colors like orange. And this is just kind of goes into color theory. Those colors are scientifically proven to spark your creativity. So, it's basically saying, hey, let's take interior design from this idea that is just like, let me just like place some cute items, but let's take it a step deeper. Let's talk about like feng shui, like how does your space function? Let's talk about the lighting. Let's talk about plants and what that may do for your health. Let's talk about, how you're able to move in the space and what that might feel like. So again, just to reiterate, that's the idea that your interior design can affect you both negative or positive, just kind of depending on where you're at.
Wow.
So that's so interesting, right? Because I remember being in elementary school and, like, being in a room and being like, why the heck did they paint these walls
Right.
this? That's why we're acting crazy and jumping off the walls, because this color
There you
is
go.
terrible. Like, there's nothing soothing about this.
Exactly, exactly. And when we think of
Yeah.
it, billion-dollar industries know this. This is something that they do on purpose. It's very similar to like marketing. So there's a reason why a hospital may feel a certain way and a cafe might feel a certain way. And I use the word feel because I don't say that it's designs. I say these are feelings. So when you walk into a cafe, there's a feeling that you get, right? Usually a warm feeling, a cozy feeling. When you walk into a hospital, it feels sterile. It feels like you're in a clinical space, and that's done by design.
Hmm. Hmm. And
That's
when you
very
go to the theme park, you feel like eating. When you
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, there are colors that induce eating. There are colors that induce tiredness. There are colors, the color is like one of the biggest ones because it's one of the most important design decisions that you'll make is what color a room is and things like that. And so, yeah, it gets kind of deep just kind of when you think about it. Like, even I read like a study that said in the military, before they want someone to do like a really dangerous act, they'll make them close their eyes and envision the color red for like 30 seconds. That color just, for whatever reason, gives you that spark to go ahead and do something really quick. So perhaps if we took those kind of ideas and put them in our space, and then more importantly, we start saying, how does my space make me feel? When I walk into my home, do I feel excited? Do I feel happy? Do I feel calm? Do I feel anxious? Why am I feeling that way? Could it be, clutter? Because I say clutter in the house, clutter in the spaces can clutter your mind. Could it be that it just doesn't reflect me? I don't feel like, because you can buy a bunch of pretty things from the store and say, I'll take that, go to a showroom and say, just give me all of that. But let's say you bring it home and it just truly doesn't reflect you. There's going to be a little bit of uneasiness underneath the surface that you might not even really understand.
Yeah, this is cool. I'm enjoying this conversation, right? Because I am definitely one of those people. Like, if it's cluttered, I can't think. I cannot
Mm-hmm.
go to bed. Like, I can't start on my homework or whatever it is that I'm doing until it is neat, because I just cannot function in spaces that
Absolutely.
are all over the place. And so you mentioned that you're beginning to do some work with masjids and schools and things of
Mm-hmm.
that nature. And
Mm-hmm.
so, talk to us about, like, how what interior wellness looks like
Mm-hmm.
in a school and
Yeah.
or in a masjid, and particularly for, um, like, setting spaces up for children.
Yes. So, alhamdulillah, I have had the pleasure of working with the local Islamic school. And for me, I approached it from a very holistic standpoint. Okay, what would I, as like my inner child, what would I want to see? What were some of the things that were conflicting in a design that maybe, back in the day that maybe I didn't understand back then, but maybe now I can, really conceptualize that. And so for me, it started there. And for me, it started with, instead of it looking like, let's say, a hotel or something like that, this is a space for children. And so for me, it started with, let's put some bright colors. You know what I mean? Let's put a lot of splash of colors. Now, should we just go crazy and not have the design behind it? No, but it started there. So I started researching what colors um, evoke creativity, what colors are inspiring, what colors are for certain rooms, what colors were calming, what colors made you more intrigued and things like that. So I started like really basic from the color standpoint. How can I very easily get like an instant feeling with those colors? Then it went to function. I feel like, okay, as a kid, maybe sometimes I was sitting at a desk, but then maybe sometimes I wanted to go like on a beanbag and read a book. You know what I mean? So, okay, let's maybe put some different seating areas, because nowadays we understand there's different learning types. There's different ways that kids learn. Not every kid can sit in a desk and just kind of get information, and that's the only way to do it. So then I started thinking about just functionally, how can I get more seating in here just to do that? Then it was basically, okay, how do I now make sure that teachers are feeling comfortable in here? So, okay, practically, how does a teacher move around in that room? Does she need, is it practical to have her supplies on the other side of the room, or does she need to have these things right here? And so all of those, and to me, it's eliminating pain points. Okay, let me eliminate a pain point that might be here through design. So, okay, maybe let's have like a little cabinet here. Okay, maybe let's do this. Okay, a teacher's lounge. What do teachers do in a teacher's lounge? Are they literally lounging, or is this a place for them to catch up? You know what I mean? Like, let's think of it. And then it started with, let's have this conversation. Let's start thinking from a really practical way. Okay, teachers like to go and chat and have coffee. So maybe we can have a few stand-up tables where we don't necessarily need a chair, because maybe they're in and out throughout the day. You know, they don't actually have a full hour to sit down. They really just catch 15 minutes of coffee, you know? So it was just kind of like starting from there. And then you start placing the items, and then thinking about space planning, and then thinking about function. And so for a school in particular, those things are very important. When I had the pleasure, alhamdulillah, of designing a mother's room for the Atlanta Masjid, the thought process was a little different, because I personally have recently used that room. I have a 4-year-old, and we still use that room to this day. And so, okay, what were some of the pain points that I heard moms talking about? What were some of the things that I wished we had in that? Okay, I understand the building was built in, like, you know, many years ago. I can't just do ultra modern, because now you have a room that is completely separate from the entire masjid. Okay, so how do I push it forward without leaving the rest of the design behind? You know, so all of those questions, it starts with questions. It starts with a thought. Okay, how do I make this better? How do I improve? And then you start putting, you know, your pen to paper and just kind of executing off of that. And I really liken it to a puzzle. For me, I feel uneasy until those puzzle pieces are together. And I know that the design is right when my mind feels at ease. That's the only way I can explain it. Then I feel like, okay, I feel good now. I know that that's going to match here, that's going to connect here, and then the puzzle is complete. And then it's just about executing.
Wow. So what about the classroom? That sounds, it sounds exciting for the mother's room in the masjid. And have you designed any classrooms? And what was the impact, and what was the result of that?
So for me, I was when I did do a school, I was on a team, and so my main areas were like the lobby, where you come in and you see, you know, your first introduction. I also was responsible for like the cafeteria, and then a teacher's lounge, but I also was there to help with the classrooms. And so for me, the classrooms, like I was saying earlier, was just about function. What would students enjoy in this room? What would make me excited? I know that when I go to a place that looks fresh and, you know, looks like there's some thought, I take it more serious, right? It's kind of like, I think people feel more comfortable to throw trash if there's already trash on the floor. You know what I'm saying? So if a space is designed well, you feel like, okay, let me treat this space nice. Let me, you know, sit up a little straighter in my chair, because this space, someone has taken time. So practically, we just go back to, how do little people think? Okay, so we have some different seating here, some, you know, some different tables where we might have some sensory items, that, especially when we're talking about like the elementary age, maybe we can have some sensory items here, so that, you know, on those little breaks, we can have some, you know, interactive things to do. The colors played a huge part for the classroom. If there was like a little nook that was quiet time, I used maybe cooler colors, like the blues and things like that, just to evoke a calmness. But maybe in a science lab where we're being really creative and we're, you know, doing something innovative, I might use orange. So, you know, just kind of thinking in that way, and putting myself and then the team on the idea of, how do we make this space function better, but also elevate it. Storage is really important for teachers. I think one of their biggest pain points is just not knowing where things are and not having a place for everything, and making sure clutter is not an issue, and making sure that when it's time to do those cleanup moments, that those moments are quick because every kid knows where it goes. And, just like I said, eliminating those pain points for teachers and students.
That part about cleaning
So
up. Yeah. That's
yeah. So I love that you do this work, right? Because as I'm hearing you talk about it, one, your passion definitely comes through, right? We can see it on your face that this is what you love. But I just love it even for us as a community that we have access to someone like you who understands, right? That it makes a difference what colors we just throw up on the wall. And so
Right.
I'm going to ask my first question, then I'm going to come back to another statement that I was going to make. But my question was around how do you find that balance? Because it definitely sounds like this dance, right? Of this space is for teachers, but it's also for children, and they're thinking from two different angles of
Hmm.
what feels good. And I
Hmm.
absolutely understood what you meant when you said, like, I know it's I know it's the right thing when it feels good to me, because that's how I
Right.
approach my grant writing.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, this ain't sitting well with me, and then all of a sudden it feels good, and you're like, yes, that's it.
Yeah. That
So
click. Yeah.
answer my question. My question is like, you know, how how do you get to that, like, you know, I don't know, that finely orchestrated design, because you are designing for both the teacher and the student.
Yeah, so it is a dance, right? It is a dance that you have to do. And alhamdulillah, I've been doing this for a while where I kind of, you know, for teachers specifically is relatively new, but because I have design acumen and design background, I kind of understand where it needs to lie. But I think the biggest thing is communication. So I think most teachers are excited to design their classroom. I think, most teachers come in kind of with a theme, an idea, a color, something. And so it's important not to just be like, no, it's a designer should never come in and squash ideas. That's not the point. But a designer, it should be there to enhance and try to kind of, your job is to embody that person. It's not designing for myself. I'm not designing what I would like. It's designing what functions better and what they would like. So for me, talking to the teachers is most important, just because while I take into consideration the student, I think that a teacher really, their classroom is very connected to them. You know what I mean? They really take pride in their classroom. They really want their classroom to feel like a second home, an extension of themselves. So I think that if I were to like put a hierarchy there, I would probably put the teacher first, just because it's like, okay, what do you need to be your best self? If the teacher isn't their best self, I don't think the students are going to be able to have a good school year, or, you know what I mean? So how can we make the teachers be their best selves? What do you like? If I love green and think green is going to be spectacular, you absolutely hate it, then I'm not going to do green. We're going to talk about what else to do. You know what I mean? What ideas did you have? You love owls. Okay, let's see how we can incorporate owls, if that's something that you love, because it's about empowering the teacher, in my opinion, and making sure that they feel really comfortable in their space that they're going to spend so much time in. And then, of course, the students, come into consideration as well. I'm a parent, so I'm able to like talk to the market audience and say, hey guys, what did you like in your classroom? What would you like to see in your classroom? What were some of the things that you would improve on? And so like communication, I think, is where you kind of strike that chord. And then ultimately, you're giving your expertise and saying, hey, I like that, but hey, maybe let's think of it this way. So I think that's the way to kind of get around that.
Oh, I don't know. Dr. Patricia's okay. I think she was frozen. I was like, wait a minute. But
yeah.
go ahead. Did you have something, Dr. Patricia?
Yeah. I like the idea of you touching bases with both. and the teacher and the student. And sometimes administration, beyond teacher and student, and sometimes beyond principal, some people step in and they'll say, well, you know what, we need to raise more money. We need to have more students in this classroom, like
Mm-hmm.
more students in the classroom. And
Mm-hmm.
the teacher is saying, but we're at capacity. No, you can get one or two more students in, because see, their mind is that all those students need to do is sit at that desk and
Right.
receive information, and
Yeah.
if you have enough room, the teacher can get to the blackboard, I mean to the board, the whiteboard, then that's all you need.
Right.
So talk about that. Talk really need in these classrooms, please.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that what you spoke to is a teacher surviving. You know what I mean? They're surviving through it. But we don't want them to survive. We want them to thrive. We want them to feel good. We want them to, do their best. And I think that that model, like, and of course, and I understand wanting to get as many students as you can, because hey, we need to keep these lights on. We need to be able to pay these teachers. I understand both perspectives. But as a person, I think we need to get back to what we're doing, and that's teaching and making sure that we're enriching these little ones. I don't think a teacher is going to be able to thrive in that type of environment. And so for me, it's about how can we uplift this experience for the teacher and for the students, and how can we make the best out of it and make people excited to kind of come in, make people excited to start their day, and it's kind of like when you open that hotel room and it's nice, you feel excited, you feel happy, you slept in your own bed, but this just feels different. It feels something. You want that feeling for your teachers when they open their classroom door. You want that feeling for your students when they open that classroom door. And that's why I say it's not designs. These are feelings that we're doing. We're trying to evoke a certain emotion.
Yeah, and so we do have a question from our viewership. Quest Up Game Development. This is our brother out of New York. I always remember when I see the game, because that's the name of the game that he created. He says, Alhamdulillah, my mother, a lifelong educator, always talked about the importance of the walls of any classroom or school for the students' environment shapes their learning. And he was saying this is a great segment.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, talk to us about those walls. I mentioned that earlier,
Yeah.
like that. We can't just be throwing the dark blue paint on the wall because you love dark blue, like
Or because it was cheap at the Home Depot.
or
Yes.
that too, right?
Because you could get 1,000,000 gallons for $100. I
Right.
understand. Yes. like I said, I understand necessity. I understand all of those things. And so I'm not trying to poke fun at what we have to do. Sometimes it is what it is. But I think that with a little thought, it actually doesn't have to cost more, right? It doesn't have to be this extravagant thing. With just a little bit more thought, we can start, kind of conceptualizing these things matter. And I think it's just a point of saying this actually matters. It actually matters a lot. You know what I'm saying? Like, this is not something to just think about last minute. Oh yeah, we got to paint those walls. Oh yeah, we got to put up some posters that, you just random posters. These are things that we need to really start thinking and really planning ahead of time so that we are thoughtful about it. But yes, walls in any design, especially in a classroom, are going to be your most important, because that's where your artwork is. That's where your messages are going to be. That's where your colors are, by and large. So the walls of any space are going to be like your bread and butter. That's going to be the first thing that you're going to kind of be drawn to. And so I think that's also where teachers have the opportunity to bring their own creativity. I've seen many teachers who have like a really creative acumen, like do wonderful murals, or, can cut like things out of cardboard and paper and just create like this masterful space. And that is a teacher thriving. You know what I mean? That is a teacher in their space that they feel comfortable in, and it'll be translated to teachers. So I think that most teachers understand that, hey, we can't just have a blank room. This isn't, and I think we know these things, we just never really talked about it. You know what I mean? I think we understand we can't just have nothing on the walls.
Right.
Teachers understand we got to decorate this. You know what I'm saying? We have to put some things on the walls. We need banners and, boards with messages. And we might have pictures of the kids of, so they can feel like this is their space too. And, all types of creative ways to make the space feel like a second home. You think about it, the kids are in those spaces for a large part of the day. We want to make sure that those spaces are spaces that feel good for them.
Alhamdulillah.
Yeah. So, and Dr. Patricia talks about the capacity of the room, and I'm just curious to know, in your work, do you ever address room capacity, or is that like out of the purview of the design piece? Because I just imagine you going into a space and being like, okay, we're gonna create this, but like,
Mhm.
please guys, don't throw 30 children in this room.
Right. Because that's not going to work.
Right.
Absolutely. And that's the function portion of the design. How does this room function? How can we function? There are certain regulations and things like that you just can't possibly overlook. Fire codes and things like that you just have to adhere to just because, we want to have a safe environment. I think that, yes, there's a conversation. Hey, teachers, I know you might love this particular poster, but let's get it QC'd. This could throw some things off. This particular thing might seem really cool, but we might want to, think about that a little bit more. But yes, function is over everything. If you have a pretty room that doesn't function, then what's the point, right? So function takes, top priority.
You mentioned talking to the teacher. Every school will not be able to have a sister Aida to to come in. I mean, it was wonderful that we
I
could.
don't know. We might be trying to contract our sister out. You want to travel, sis? You want to
Hey,
travel?
I for hire, willing to travel. Your nearest school or master.
Yeah. Well, well, you know what? Then this, in that case, you can uh, to maximize your reach. You know,
Hmm.
would it be possible to do like, because I've never gone to a workshop or
Hmm.
session on how to make your classroom more thriving and
Yeah.
more, you know, child friendly, or I've never had that kind of
Yeah.
instructions or some or that kind of information. So, like, is that something even reasonable or feasible to
Yeah.
about that as being something?
Yeah. I definitely think that it's reasonable and feasible, especially with technology like this, being able to kind of have a conversation about, hey, what are the do's and the don'ts? What are some things that you can and cannot do or shouldn't, or you might want to lean away from this. So having kind of like a informational session, you know what I mean? Just, hey, where do we start? Here's some things you might not have known about color that you might want to put into consideration before you kind of slap that on all the walls. Here's some things about proportions and scale, so that you can make sure that your room feels a certain way when you come in. Here's some things about lighting. Here's some things about, setting moments. I'm really about having moments in rooms, because, like you said, not everybody may be able to go and just like design their whole room, but you could probably do a corner. You know what I mean? You could probably do a space in your room. You can start there where you feel like even like a prayer area, or, a corner where you read, or just like a space. You know what I mean? We could start there to kind of start feeling better about our space. So absolutely, I think that it would be something that I would for sure advocate for.
Okay.
That every teacher, hey, let's just have like a quick session to say, hey, here's why this matters. Here's what you might be conveying in your classroom that you didn't even know you were conveying. Is this what you were trying to say? Is this how you wanted the room to feel? I don't know. Just kind of starting there.
Okay. All right.
And do
Sounds
you
good.
ever get pushback from, like, when you're offering, and we're not throwing nobody under the bus, so, but in working with institutions, like, do you ever maybe pitch something where they're like, no, I really love this. I don't know about that. Or I don't think that that's as important as you may think it is.
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely. And if everybody has their preference, like I said, it's okay. I'm not here to say someone's preference is better than the other, but I can say, hey, this is what that does for the room. Is that what you want it to happen? And then I think if you start kind of saying things like that, well, I never thought about it like that, then you might get that kind of answer. Well, no, that's not really what I wanted. Did you want the classroom to feel smaller?
Right,
Was
right,
that what
right.
you wanted?
Was that what you were going for?
Is that the point? No. Okay, well, you might not want to do that. When
Right.
you start talking, saying things like that, then I think people kind of understand. Alhamdulillah, I have not had much of that. So I'm blessed that most people who get my services or want my services understand that, hey, I might not know what to do. So let me lean on the person who kind of has a little bit more experience.
Right, right. And we do have a comment from the viewership. We should also keep in mind students with sensory issues. So, can you
Mm-hmm,
talk a little bit about that? We quite often we do have children in the classroom who have those sensory issues, right? So,
mm-hmm,
loud noises. To the color point that you were making, right? Certain colors may just be so off-putting that it
mm-hmm,
disrupts the ability of the child to receive instruction. Maybe
mm-hmm.
the furniture isn't to the point that the child is able to sit there because that
Right.
furniture is designed in a way that is so uncomfortable. So does that
Yeah.
ever come into your design? And talk to us a little bit about it.
It does, and the disclaimer: I'm in no way an expert on, how to design a space specifically for people who might have sensory issues. But what I do know is that yes, we need to be considering that. I think we're at a day and age where there's so much information and we're understanding things a little bit better. Or that child that might have been that problem child back in the day, we're understanding maybe that's not a problem child. Maybe this child might have some of those sensory issues or may have, something else going on. And so we need to be mindful that, you know, how can we best suit, our classroom to be inclusive to everybody, and make everybody feel good when they come in here. And I think that's again where we go into those, hey, maybe we have a little nook. Maybe we have these little areas that we can kind of carve out in our spaces so that we can, if someone is having, an issue with something going on, a noise or something, maybe we can have an area that is here that we can kind of, hey, maybe let's take a moment and go there. So this is 100% underneath that umbrella of interior wellness. Why? Because that space is starting to make that person not feel comfortable. It might not make them feel good. And you can fix that with design. You can improve that with design. And so that's just another area that I think that we can start talking about interior design. And I think that for me, it was, going to school and seeing what interior design was. It felt to me very kind of frivolous, but and it was hard for me to kind of adjust my mind to say, where do I fit in this space? I don't want to, necessarily design the 30th design for a millionaire. That's not necessarily what I want to do. How do I connect all of the pieces that make me, I have a degree in sociology. How do I connect those pieces so that I can feel like this is representative? And once interior wellness was there, it was like a light bulb on the left.
Wow, that was wonderful that you came up with that idea of interior wellness, because it makes sense. How we feel in a space, it has a lot to do with our wellness, and then sometimes our wellness has a lot to do with how we're going to feel in the space,
Yes,
so one affects
absolutely.
the other, right? Yeah. So
Mhm, bingo. Yeah.
and so, yeah, so now you're going, and where do we spend, where the children spend most of their time? In a classroom, in the school, in the classroom. And
Absolutely.
that is so, it makes so much sense that we would
Yeah.
spend some as much, spend the time, also time, we spend time on the curriculum, right? We spend
Hmm.
time on how important that is. It's just as important to spend time on how this space is going to look and feel to the people who have to be in it for 7 hours or more
Absolutely.
per day.
Yes. Yeah, you hit the nail on the head with that one. We have to start taking it just as serious. Now, of course, can I say is as important as the curriculum? Maybe, because if I can't sit still in this room because this is making me feel antsy for some reason, I don't know why. The lights, fluorescent lights. We talk about just little things like that. Fluorescent lights are not conducive really to a learning environment. Unfortunately, most environments have those lights, but they aren't. You can talk about just setting a mood with light. When you go into a restaurant, you don't see a very bright restaurant. Why? Because you want the feeling to feel different. You want it to feel cozier. You have different variations of lighting. So just a simple thing of making those lights that adjust from cool to warm. Just those things that we talk about can make your classroom feel totally different. You can evoke a feeling with just the lighting. So for me, yes, we need to start taking this serious, very serious, actually.
He's like, especially since I do this, right?
Right, Alhamdulillah.
So I just wanted to do a quick station identification. You are watching The Power of Educating Our Own. This show is hosted by the Clyde Muhammad Schools Network. We are a network of 19 schools. Those 19 schools are full-time, strong in, which also we call weekend. Well, I say weekend, we call strong in, right? That's the coin term that we give into it, and virtual schools across the United States and in Bermuda. And this show tonight, we are talking all things interior design and interior wellness. And we've been talking with Sister Aida Akil about that interior wellness and design in the school, right? How do we design our spaces, and how are we more thoughtful about what these spaces have in them, what they look like, how they're configured, so that our children are in an environment that is conducive to learning. And so I want to transition us a little bit, still talking about the children, right, and maybe even young adults, right, but or our teenage population. Let's talk about our masjids, right, because we may not necessarily, for those who are watching it, we may not necessarily have a school, right? A full-time school, but perhaps we have a masjid that has a weekend school, strong in school, and those spaces have a dual function, right? They're co-mingled spaces, and so what are we doing in spaces that perhaps we do have some limitations on, like, you know, this is not this is not a
Right.
dedicated classroom, right? So
Yeah.
so what, like, what can you do in here so that they're
Hmm.
not like, yeah, no, this is not for this space all the time, Sister Aida. You just
Yeah.
come in here and
Yeah.
redo
Redo
the whole
everything.
space. So what are
Yeah.
some things that people can do in their, like, in their masjid to make room for the younger people to feel like they have a space there?
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, that's actually a great question. Just because, like you said, I grew up in a school that was dual purpose. We didn't always have a classroom that was just dedicated to a classroom. So that is something that happens, and that's just where you are. I think design should meet you where you are. And so for me, that's where being clever with the space. There's many things like modular furniture. So like maybe one day it's a couch, but the next day it's a chair because you're able to flip it. And now we don't need that full couch because today, we're not going to have students in it today. We just need it for an office or something, so we can have modular furniture. We can have nest where I don't know if you ever seen like, there could be a table that literally kind of like folds down from the wall. You know what I mean? And then we
Yeah.
put it back up and we don't need it. All of these things are ways to be clever with the design and really think about function. And there's ways to do it. I just don't want it to be like a hodgepodge. It should feel like a space that is dedicated for this. Then we put that up and now it's dedicated for this. It shouldn't be like, oh, you can't go over there because that's the space that they do that in. You know, oh, don't touch that. You know, storage becomes very important. Why? Because, you know, the teacher wants to have their things where they had them when they left. And now it's a conference room when it was your classroom just last week, you know. Having storage that's functional and making sure that we're thinking about that, you know, being clever with your space planning. So, you know, hey, I might be able to kind of have things on wheels so that I can easily push them to the side when I don't need them. You know, I think that those type of things are things that we should just think about a little bit more. And I think that what I have noticed is that we are operating from a necessity standpoint. Like, we just need to get this done.
Yeah, exactly.
uh you know, we just, okay, just bring that desk in. Okay, so and so had something at their house, and just go ahead and bring this in. This is what we're going to do. And that's okay. You know, I understand designing out of necessity, but if we're trying to move things forward, we're not just trying, in my opinion, as Muslims, we want to move it forward a little bit. We want to make sure that we're elevating, you know, everything that we do, and design is one of them.
Oh wow, you just hit. Oh my, thank you, Monica. That was the best question.
That was a good question.
MashaAllah. That was the best question, because as you were talking, I'm just feeling it. Like, you know, because we have the weekend school, and we have this, it's in this room, and then and then we have bag.
I was not talking about Dr. Patricia's space.
That so much. It's worth me going out and selling some cookies and doing something to bring you down here.
Get so Alhamdulillah.
To pay you to come here and help us. What is crazy?
Yeah.
How you know how we have to switch this around and turn this up, and you know, you go in the room, and the room they've done this to the room, and here you bring your little children in, and you don't want them to be in this mess that's been created.
Right.
You're trying to rush to clean it up so they can. Oh my gosh! So yes,
Yeah.
this
And I think, Sister Patricia, what you just spoke about is you just had a negative feeling for about an hour before the kids came, right? Because now you're in panic mode. I gotta fix it, do it, and so these things are affecting us
yes
in other ways, you know, and that's kind of where I want to keep bringing it back to. These are affecting us day to day today, and we may not understand it. Now we're frustrated. The day is seeming hard and tough, you know, because we came in immediately in a panic mode, immediately, oh, we got to fix this, we got to do something, because the design wasn't up to par. The design wasn't what we needed to thrive. It was just there for us to survive and get it done.
Yeah. I mean, that as I'm hearing you talk about it, I'm like, yeah, I you know, just in practice, I don't think we're used to being thoughtful in that way, right? Because it's more about, okay, I mean, if we're talking about our schools, it's like, okay, we need to be able to get, you know, butts in the chair and teach these children, right? And not necessarily being thoughtful about what does the space look and feel like, right? Especially when we are challenged financially, right? Because I've been in some school spaces where I'm like, this is amazing, right? And I also know that those particular schools have budgets that allow them to do those sorts of things. And I think, you know, creativity really comes in when your budget isn't as large. And now you're like, what can I do? Like, you know,
How can I
when I
improve
walk
this?
into this room, it looked like this, and I don't even know how I could change it up too much. So it's gonna look like this.
It is what it is. We're just gonna keep it. Yeah, the budget is a challenge. I think that for me, looking at like universities, they do it really well. If you go to a university, they understand that design is important. They have, you know, different nooks and areas and spaces, and you know, they understand that, okay, we're educating, but this design has to be on point because we want them to take it serious. We want our students to feel comfortable, all of that. But when budgets are tight, yes, that becomes difficult. It becomes a bigger challenge, and it becomes something that, you know, you do have to be a little bit more creative with. You do have to kind of maybe take your time a little bit more, and kind of, you know, maybe we won't have a few things for a little bit until we can get the right things, you know, and for me, I'm just a big advocate for paint, just because paint is $36 a gallon and it can do so much. It really can do so much to a space. So for me, I start right there. Hey, can we paint the space? If we can paint it, then let's start there.
Yeah, and I'm glad you just said that, because I was just thinking to ask you, what are some things, what are some practical things that you can do in spaces, if you do have a challenge, budget wise, or if you have some space constraints. And then, sort of what, along with that question, what are sort of the new things, right? The new things that are out there in reference to
Yeah.
design that, would sort of help in some of those constraints that we have with budget and space.
Yeah, paint, like I said, that's the number one thing that I'll say, because it just takes a little manpower and and having a thoughtfulness about what paint colors you want to choose. And that right there, lighting, I know it can be a little bit more difficult, but perhaps let's bring in a floor lamp, so that when we're doing story times or something like that, maybe we can change the lighting up. And now we're like getting that calm that we want out of the students. We went from bright fluorescence, now we're bringing it down to like a floor lamp type of situation. Let's say, again, building those nooks. You might not be able to outfit your entire classroom, but you can build a space. So let's have a reading corner where we have a few bean bags on the floor, and we're able to kind of just let the kids lounge and relax. You know what I mean? So for me, it's just about carving out those little spaces, paint colors, lighting, space planning doesn't cost anything. Okay, maybe, you know, I look into feng shui and stuff like that, just because to me those things matter. So okay, where should we put a teacher's desk in relation to the student's desk? You know, where should we place our um, our, you know, rugs, so that we can kind of carve out the spaces. Okay, so if I place a rug here and a rug here, in my mind these are two different areas, right? I've just created two different areas just like that. So for me, it's just about those little things, like just kind of doing those little things to do it. I'm a big proponent for plants, making sure that you are keeping some real live plants in your classroom, just because that will keep, you know, the oxygen flowing, good air quality, all of those things. Making sure we have air purifiers and stuff like that, those things matter as well. So just those little things, if you can bring just even like a small plant for your desk, that's going to change the feel of the room. That's going to change the way that people, you know, interact in the room. That's just going to change the air quality in the room. So, you know, those things.
Yeah, and then another question I have, is, are these things transferable to the home, right? So yeah, those children are in the classroom, but they got to come home, right? And so
Yeah.
are some of the
Yeah.
things that you're telling us, right, talking about, can we transfer these things to our
Mhm.
homes?
Absolutely. And I think that every child should have their own space, whatever that looks like for you. It might not be their own room, but it might be a corner where that's their corner. You know what I'm saying? They get to go over there. It might be a desk, and they get to design their desk and decide what color their desk is and what color their chair is. It could be any from small to large. I feel like a child should have those things, because I think that we don't understand kind of, if a child comes home and nothing feels like them, you know what I mean? Nothing feels like this is a space for me, that I can just feel like, okay, this is my space. I feel comfortable here. I can, you know, have a chalkboard desk where I get to write all over my desk if I want to. You know, I think that we can transfer that to home, you know what I mean? And I think that when we're specifically talking about children, I feel like they should be empowered to have something like that. And then I think organization, that doesn't cost anything. I think making sure that your space is organized and decluttered is like a quick way that doesn't cost anything to make your space feel instantly better. Um, So yes, these all of the things that I said transfer 100% to your home. And I like to, like I said, I like to meet people where they are. I think people think, oh, interior designer, that's for the rich. And yes, to a degree it is, but when we talk about interior wellness, no, that's for you. That's for everybody. Everybody has to think about this because it's happening. You're putting things in your home, you're doing things. So you are designing your home, whether you know it or not. And how you're doing it is affecting you, whether you know it or not. So, those little simple keys to make sure that, we're being intentional about what we're doing in our spaces.
Yeah, absolutely. Dr. Fisher, you're on mute. I see you trying to talk, but you went on mute.
Yes, I had some little, in my environment, the noise level changed and I put myself on mute. Um, okay, so I also had, you mentioned the clutter, decluttering the classroom, and then even all the spaces, decluttering the
Mm-hmm,
classroom,
mm-hmm,
decluttering the home. It,
mm-hmm.
and our teachers, we have these books and other stuff that
Yeah.
we feel is so important to what
Mm-hmm.
we're doing, but these very same important things do cause a lot of clutter in our classroom. How do we deal with that?
Yeah, this is something that I find in a certain generation that unfortunately, I think that a lot of, especially when we talk about our people, right? When we talk about our people, a lot of times a they've come from hardships. They've come from hardships. And so if I get this book, I don't know when I'm going to get this next book. So I don't want to throw that book out. I want to keep it, even though it's 30 years old. It might be outdated and the information is just no longer relevant because it's a mindset. Let's say that it's a mindset of lack. I don't know when I'm going to get that next thing. So I need to hold on to these things. And so for me, I have personally, seen that that is a huge issue or something that we have to overcome with a certain generation, and just being able to say, hey, just because you're getting rid of it doesn't mean that you're taking away from it. It seems counterintuitive. Maybe we can find a better situation for it, but here underneath a thousand other things, it doesn't really serve us. We could potentially, I know for a fact, I have seen whole storage areas completely full to the max. And this space is valuable real estate that could be used for so many other things, but we're holding on to things that if you wanted it, you wouldn't be able to find it anyway. So for me, it's decluttering. You have to first have a mindset that says, even though I'm getting rid of it, I'm not taking away from the things that I have. And it sounds weird because it's like, yeah, I'm taking away, but you're actually highlighting the things that are important, making the things that are important a lot easier to access, making your day-to-day a lot easier. So it's actually adding to your experience, even though it feels like I'm getting rid of a lot of things.
Mhm. So it has to
So
be
that's
a mindset change, like a paradigm shift, kind of. Because
mm-hmm,
yeah, because I know I have that problem.
mm-hmm,
You said generation. I know that was mine, and some below me, some below me. Where the younger generation, they're more into tech, so a lot of stuff is on their computers, on their
mm-hmm,
phones, books on the
mm-hmm,
computer, books on the phone, and now children, the textbooks are even some of the textbooks are also online. So
mm-hmm.
you can avoid me. I just like to feel the paper. I want that my
Yeah,
paper. I want my hands on the paper. There's a
yeah,
connection between the brain and the hands and the paper, and the eyes. So and the words. So I understand how other people, the younger generation, don't really need that, and so
yeah,
clutter doesn't have to be. It can be eliminated much faster. Yeah, and
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So yeah,
Yeah.
definitely a different mindset and just kind of being open to saying, you know what, there's a better way. This is actually harming the space. This is harming my function. This is actually, counterproductive to what I need to do every day.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate that.
Listen, this has been an amazing, amazing, amazing conversation. I think that you have sparked in all of our minds things about interior design and spaces that we probably don't normally think about. So I just want to say we appreciate you for coming on and sharing this with us. For those, so Sister Aida, do you have I think you have a company that you do this work through, correct? Okay,
I do,
tell
yes.
us about your
Yes.
company. I don't want
Yes.
to miss the opportunity to share that
Alhamdulillah.
information with our viewers.
Thank you. Yes. No, I'm rebranding. So like I said, I'm kind of moving more into those commercial spaces. So my business is called Merm Interiors. And I'm basically, hey, if you have a commercial space or a space that you are looking to improve, a doctor's office or, any space where you're like, hey, this design really matters, a commercial space, then yes, I am definitely who you can contact. You can reach me at now through my Instagram page, which is Aida's Creative Life. You can reach me through all social media there, and I am very responsive.
Wonderful, wonderful. And so, again, thank you so much for being with us today. We really appreciate having this conversation with you. As I said, I think that you definitely have brought to our attention some things that we did not think about before. And perhaps we'll be making those adjustments in our spaces to make them more conducive to whatever it is that we're trying to do. Tonight, we talked about children in spaces, but just in general, I mean, we kind of rounded out the conversation with having a space that's just conducive to what it is that we're trying to accomplish. And so even with that, those are things that we can be a little bit more thoughtful about. This has been the power of educating our own. It's been an amazing conversation, and thank you so much for being with us.
Yeah, thank you, Sister Aida. This is wonderful. I have learned so much in this short time we had this conversation, and I look forward to hearing more for us and our team.
Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
Well, until next time, this has been the power of educating our own. We will be back in this space next Sunday at 7 p.m. Join us and tell a friend. We would love to have you here on the show. Until next time, assalamu alaikum.
Gather round, it's time to cheer. 50 years of love and light, we're here. Celebrate legacy, shining so bright. Imam W. Dean's vision, guiding our flight. Hey, it's the IWDM 50 strong in. A journey through the past, where dreams transcend. From his wisdom we rise, we thrive. Honoring the legacy, keeping hope alive. Hey, 3 days of joy, a multi-generational call. New leaders emerging, we're growing tall. From community life to human excellence, together we strive to magnify this great existence. Hey, it's the IWDM 50 strong in. A journey through the past, where dreams transcend. From his wisdom we rise and we thrive. Honoring the legacy, keeping hope alive. Hey, yeah, yeah, yeah. A cultural extravaganza, performers on stage. Come celebrate our story. free, we chart our way. Hey, it's the IWD and 50 strong, and a journey through the past where dreams transcend. From his wisdom we rise and we thrive, honoring the legacy, keeping hope alive. So let's raise our production and let the world know Imam W. Dean's leadership will forever glow. Together we celebrate, together we stand. 50 years of guidance, we work hand in hand. Hey, it's the IWD and 50 strong, and together we'll shine. Let the love never end. So let's raise our production and let the world know Imam W. Dean's leadership will forever glow. Together we celebrate, together we stand. 50 years of guidance, we work hand in hand. Hey, it's the IWD and 50 strong, and together we'll shine. Let the love never end. Oh yeah, yeah. Oh, oh, oh. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Say it, I know you've been waiting for it. You've been waiting for me to say it. We cannot be stopped now.